I'm Tom French. I work at Pandemic Studios. I'm the lead designer on Saboteur. Saboteur is an open world action game, kind of set with the backdrop of World War II, mainly kind of focused on Nazi-occupied Paris.
Basically, you play as a character named Sean. He's rough trade. He's a tough guy. He's a tough Irishman who was just caught up in the wrong place at the wrong time, and had a guy, a Nazi in particular, his name is Dirker, who, you know, went out of his way to do some bad things to Sean's friends and family.
The concept of it is that, like I said, he's not a war soldier. He is a guy that's kind of caught into it, and so he kind of has to learn and use the tools around him and use what he's good at.
Melee system is again, it's up close and personal. So a lot of this is all about bringing this, bringing the personal story. Sean is a rough and tumble guy. He never met a barroom fight that he never walked away from. I mean, this guy goes in and just likes to just pummel people. Grabs. So grabs are in your arsenal. Headbutts are in your arsenal of melee.
We really latched onto this personal story about this guy like I said, in the wrong place in the wrong time, trying to kind of use what was around him to achieve his goals.
The look of Saboteur is very much inspired and driven first and foremost by a mechanic that we're calling the will to fight. And the will to fight is basically a visual representation of what's happening in the world.
As the game, like when the game starts, essentially the Paris is the Paris of Amelie. It's beautiful, it's colorful, but as the Nazis roll in and occupy it, the color in life is literally sucked out of the world. Civilians' behaviors will change as that happens. And so around the world, you'll see scattered pockets of Nazi occupation where the areas are black and white. That'll affect weather. Civilians won't really be occupying those areas. And then as the player progresses through the game, those areas will become liberated. And they'll grow back in color, and then, which will, again, change the population. The civilians will start to come out. And if you're in that area engaging Nazis, the civilians will cheer you on and kind of encourage you and boost you along. We wanted to make our world fairly dangerous. And so you can't walk around in an occupied city with a gun slung on your back. That's not what a saboteur would have to do. So we really wanted to give him some options to kind of get around in the city. So we made it so that he can scale buildings, and he's not like Superman. He can't just leap up the building, but he can like scale the buildings, climb drain pipes, find lines, and like jump across windowsills and kind of slowly make his way up to kind of get up and over the occupation below and move around and stealthily kind of the way he needs to.
Music is something that I think is important to games, and I don't think games take it, in general, take them seriously enough.
I think part of that we're most proud of is kind of, we want to keep a lot of the spirit in the music. Paris had a great jazz scene. A lot of us are really big fans of that.
And so that means let's bring in some really, like big band jazz that you haven't heard before. I mean, that we've dug through as we've been, looking to score this game. And bring that out to the player, and also modernize it and update it. So as much as there might be some classic big band jazz, I think we're going to kind of give it sort of a reinterpretation.
Saboteur is coming out in 2008 on next generation platforms.
Hey everybody, I've got Tom French from Pandemic Studios right here, and we're going to talk the Saboteur. So Tom, obviously World War II is a pretty common setting for video games, but your game is doing something pretty unique with that. What can you tell us about the Saboteur, and how does it set itself apart from those other World War II games?
It's something really, we made a very conscious decision early along in the development of the project that so the main thing originally was just separating the story. The game's not about being a soldier. You're about a race car driver turned saboteur. And so that's actually inspired by a real world hero named William Grover Williams. And so we started with that, and so we really just kept wanting to kind of separate ourselves from the war. And so our game's not in the front lines. It's more like a blockbuster action movie, like an Indiana Jones or something like that. So it's not, it's just killing Nazis. You're blowing up Zeppelins and doing like big action moments as well. And then on top of that, we have the whole kind of the will to fight mechanic with the black and white and color, which really just does something different that you're not used to seeing in this kind of space.
Can you describe that in a bit more detail, that will to fight mechanic, and how it changes over the course of the game?
So the concept for the will to fight came when basically we knew we were going to do occupied Paris, and you think about Paris when you close your eyes and you have this beautiful, vibrant, colorful, lively city, but if you just put Nazis in there, it doesn't feel occupied. And so we really had to kind of turn that over on its head, and that's where we came up with the idea of doing black and white, and so it literally kind of sucking the life out of the world. And so it kind of inspired by Sin City, we put up the kind of the big bold colors and the flags. And so as a player, to us, that represents occupation in the world. And so as the player plays these kind of big missions in the game and does these grand acts of sabotage and defiance against the Nazis, he'll bring the color back to the world, which is, and to us, color is inspiration. And you're not like single-handedly liberating Paris by yourself. You're not a lone wolf like taking down the Reich. But at the same time, you're inspiring the people in the world. And as you inspire the people in the world, they'll come back to life, and they'll come back out into the streets and almost to their pre-war lifestyles. And then after that, we'll really come to resistance. And that's really where the gameplay comes from, the inspiration. The people will be inspired, and that will bring resistance in the streets. And that's where the gameplay comes in, as they fight back alongside you.
Now, you mentioned Paris as the game's setting, and obviously the Saboteur is sort of this open-world sandbox game, and in those types of games, the setting is a huge part of that. How have you gone about converting such a majestic, historic city into an open-world setting?
So Paris is a huge challenge, and we actually even go off into parts of Germany and even like the upper coastal parts of France as well. But Paris was like a really unique challenge, and like getting to visit Paris, you see these buildings kind of cobbled on top of each other, and everything just has its own kind of personality to it. And we really wanted to capture the spirit of Paris, but at the same time, we didn't want to build as Paris to scale. We really wanted, as a mantra, we had this. We wanted to put something literally on every block in the game, something to do everywhere. And so what we did is we started by scaling down a map of Paris and building all the monuments to real world scale and putting them where they belonged on this map. And so what you get is almost like a Disneyland version of Paris, where things are a little bit closer than they actually are. But what's cool about that is you see a monument from every other monument, so they become navigation tools. And then from there, one of the last key things is it's kind of part of our Odin engine, and it allows us to render this way, is we built all the buildings out of kind of like Lego pieces, and so every building, and we put those down in the world, these like kind of collections, and then from there we could swap them out and give every single block its own personality and add little accents and details, and so literally every block has a different kind of flavor and feel to it.
How much control, as Sean, do you have over sort of the outcome and the story that unfolds in this game?
So Sean has this main vengeance quest, and that's his main story in the game. And through that, he starts off with somebody that really just cares about racing, cares about himself and his friends, and pretty much nothing else beyond that. And throughout the game, you'll meet people and different resistance people, and you can take on their side stories and kind of care about their problems and inspire other pockets in the world. And so that's kind of the main like character growth of the game, and it's Sean's story, and there's definitely some little interactions and twists along the way that the player will get to play.
Well, Tom, it looks like you guys are doing a lot of interesting stuff with World War II. I know I'm excited, but before I let you go, when is the game going to be released, and which platforms will it be available on?
So the Saboteur will be coming to the Xbox 360, PS3, and PC, and we don't have a date for you at the moment, but we'll get one to you really soon.
Thank you very much, Tom. We should have a lot more coverage on the Saboteur leading up to that unspecified date.
One of the unique things that you'll see about the game, that if you don't see any menus, you don't see anything about it, you just maybe see someone playing it, is the will to fight. The state of the world, when it's black and white, that means it's occupied. That means the Nazis have pretty much full control over everything. And as you continue to liberate the world and inspire people to take part in the French resistance or help you out, then it raises the will to fight to color. That's something that hasn't been done in any game at all. It's either been one or the other. Everybody either concentrates on a realistic style or they concentrate on just black and white. But having two in the same game, in the same genre, was not only very challenging but very exciting, and it's something that the player is going to be blown away by seeing not only the will to fight itself, but how it integrates into gameplay and also how it changed and how it manifests itself. That was something that with the original pitch is something that we had that we wanted to try and display already. We wanted to say how if you're making progress against the Nazis through gameplay, how do you then show that without just saying, oh, you've done, you've killed this many Nazis and you get some kind of achievement or some kind of reward or something like that. And we explored a few details, and we decided, one, that black and white was a good feeling, but then we needed to say, okay, how do we give it a modern feel to where the character feels like a bit more of a modern character, and people are also used to seeing color in games. So we decided to try and merge the two and run some experiments, see what we came up with, and we were able to find a happy medium between those two. If you think about it, it's something where if you have the same world and you take, let's say, something as a simple concept like daytime, nice sunny bright day, and then say, okay, it's now extremely stormy weather. It's the same environment, but there's a different mood that you have when you're in that same environment. There are parts of the environments that do change, especially as related to the occupation. However, the one thing that we did to make it consistent was we don't have so many changes in the world with the architecture or the different parts of the environment or props and things like that, to where you're looking at something completely different. We wanted to make sure that the player stays rooted in the era, and the era is the most important, which is World War II in Paris in the 1940s. So we kept many elements the same, but your experience that you will have with the will to fight, that is something that evolves, that changes. Your experiences with people, what they do, how they talk, different things that you can do depending on if you're in low or high will to fight. That's how we've made sure that we made the art direction stay consistent, but also give you a sense that the world is evolving.
Collars for these beautiful pendant keychains.
So Sean, we start off when we meet Sean. He's at the point where he was a mechanic turned race car driver. It's going to be his first big race. He's really excited about it, a little nervous. Wants to make his new team proud. And he's heading into Germany to go to a race. And the world at this point is, the Nazis have already begun invading other areas of the world. And so it's on basically what we consider the eve of the Paris occupation or the French occupation. And Sean goes across into the German border for this race. And he ends up running into his rival team, which is the Doppelsieg team. And so Sean has run-ins with them even before the race, the Doppelsieg team. And, rivalries start, and then Sean races against them. And I don't want to get into the details of actually what happens at that race, but they get in some trouble and things go awry. And we have this big dramatic moment happen in Sean's life. And he's fleeing the country, trying to get away from it as this Nazi occupation is beginning to happen. So you actually get to see, literally the occupation rolling into France as Sean is escaping. So when you're seeing the Nazis for the first time, what we really want to do is kind of convey their sense of power. And so when you're crossing the German border, you're seeing this big kind of looming gloom and doom kind of feel. But yet you're still kind of interlaced with this kind of happy time in the world. So you just see their power. You see tanks. You see a big, heavy occupied checkpoint and armed people. And so you get a sense of that Nazi power. So when these moments happen in the game, basically the Nazis have occupied France, and so what we have are these big kind of huge areas of the black and white in the game, and it's really dramatic, and it helped us really sell the mood of the Nazi occupation. And so as Sean goes through and completes great acts of defiance against the Nazis, the color will kind of bleed back into those areas. And what it'll generally do is it'll remove the occupation in the areas where you hit. So if you go blow up a fuel depot, when you blow up that fuel depot, which is the key part of that mission, the color will kind of bleed back into the world out of that area, and it will remain color in that area, unless something the story dictates that we actually remove the color and bring the Nazis back in for a reason.
Hey everyone, this is Mike Regan here with GamingRing.com. We're here at Electronic Arts showing off the Saboteur. Mr. French,
Yes.
Let's tell us about the game.
So Saboteur is a big open world action sandbox game set in Nazi-occupied Paris during the World War II. Our hero, Sean Devlin, he's a race car driver turned saboteur, which is actually inspired by stuff going on in there. Inspired by a real race car driver turned mechanic from World War II named William Grover Williams. So, but we really wanted to make a game not about the war. We didn't want to do a soldier story. So we wanted to make something that's kind of bigger than life and kind of heightened action. And so basically Sean's story is of vengeance. He goes over to Germany for a race, and then somebody close to him is killed after the race. What seems innocent goes wrong, basically. And then he flees into France and heads into Germany, or into Paris. And he hides out in this cabaret brothel, actually, that you can see in that shot right there, called the Belle de Nuit. And then from there, basically, he just meets the resistance. He doesn't care about the war. He's Irish. We separated him from the war with that. He's neutral. And eventually works with the resistance and becomes a hero, and ultimately his quest is to get vengeance.
Now, one of the things that struck me about the game was the art style. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that came about?
So we knew we were going to build Paris, and when you think about Paris, if you close your eyes, you get this image of this beautiful, vibrant, colorful city. Doesn't feel occupied. If you put Nazis in there, it just felt kind of out of place. And so the idea was to really, for us, we started talking about, we'll make less people and stuff, but sucking the life out of it. And then that leads to this idea of wow, let's really suck the life out of it and suck the color out of it too. So that basically became the basis for the will to fight. And so when you're in a heavy occupied area, it's black and white with the reds, the kind of Sin City inspired reds, and the colors popping through. But as you do these big missions in the game, and these big grand acts of defiance, as I like to say, you'll inspire the people, and that color will bleed back out into the world, and then that'll also end up leading to the resistance actually joining you. So actually you'll get in firefights with the resistance on your side in the streets.
Now, how long is the story? How long should the players expect to play the game?
So right now we're shooting for, it looks like it's basically about between 15 and 20 hours. It can be a lot more because there's actually a lot of content to do even in between missions. There's a whole world to explore. There's a main story mission of Vengeance, but then there's also side missions off of that. So, I mean, honestly, the player could play for a long time. I have fun just having shootouts in the streets and rooftops with the Nazis, so you could play it for as long as you want, almost in a way.
Now, basically, you can go anywhere in the city. So, like, for example, you can climb the Eiffel Tower.
Absolutely. That was I mean, the Eiffel Tower is like, you know, once we decided, we saw Paris, and you're like, okay, beautiful monuments, great. Twisty streets, great. Wow, look at those rooftops. Like, they were really inspiring. I was like, I want to run on those. And it was right around the time, too, that, you know, like right after that was like the whole parkour thing kind of started to become really big, and we'd already started doing all that stuff because it's just a whole world to explore. So now we have the streets and the roofs, and there's gameplay everywhere. So, you know, you can climb there, and yeah, of course, once that happened, we had it in the game. We're like, I want to climb the Eiffel Tower and, you know, jump off of it if I feel like it. So yeah, you can absolutely do it.
Very cool. Now, is there a main bad guy in the game? Is there a person who's controlling all the strings and responsible for the unfortunate demise of your friend?
Yeah, so there's Dirker, and what's funny is what's kind of cool is we set him up a bit as he's actually a rival racing team member too, but he's also a Nazi because he's the Doppelsieg team, we call them, which is inspired by the Mercedes of the war. The Mercedes was making armaments for the Nazis. They were making tanks and military vehicles, and so we loved that kind of story elements of that, and Mercedes was dominating the circuit at that time, and Bugatti was this kind of former champion team, and so we kind of put those ideas together. So you have this rivalry as a racer that you hate because he's a jerk. He's just a jerk. There's no better way to describe him. But then he's also a Nazi, and then yes, it kills your friend, and that leads you towards this quest of vengeance. And yeah, he's great. He's a great villain. It's classic.
Tom, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
I'm Tom French, I'm the lead designer of the Saboteur for Pandemic Studios. We're going to look at the game and talk about it a little bit here. So what we're going to do here is, this mission's about 2/3 of the way through the game. Sean's working with the SOE at this point. He's still out for revenge, but he's reluctantly working with the British SOE here because he needs to find out where Dirker is, the guy that killed his best friend, but he doesn't know how to get to him. And SOE does, but they're like, we're not going to just help you. You help us, we'll help you. So we're here in Paris right now. You can see the Arc de Triomphe there. There's a lot of Paris to be discovered. You'll see the black and white. This is us. This is how we sold the occupation. We needed to feel occupied. Like where you saw in the game earlier that's where the black and white comes into the game, and it's about right after your friend dies is the mood of the world changes, and as you fight back in the big missions of the game, you inspire the people, bring the color back, and that will also bring the resistance to fight alongside of you. So we're getting through the checkpoint here, and we're going to head out into the countryside, which is a little bit less occupied. So you'll see the color actually out here. But you kind of move in and out of the color, and especially as you keep progressing through the game and inspiring different areas, there'll be more pockets of color. And they generally remain color in the game until there's like a big story moment where we'll maybe take the color out and go back to black and white, like if the Germans are invading the area or something like that. We wanted the kind of the sneakier elements being of Saboteur, sneaking rather than always going in guns a-blazing and shooting everybody in sight. So you can sneak around in the game, but we didn't want it to be stealth. We didn't want it to have the harsh penalties of stealth where the moment you get caught, you're dead or the mission's over. So for us, it was about sneaking and then a little bit, but then basically what we wanted to do is have the player get up and get a disguise. So you can get up behind somebody, beat them over the head or break their neck, take their uniform, which allows you to now move a little more freely through the environment. So we've designed our missions around what we call quiet in, loud out. So the idea is that encourage the player to go in quietly, make the area dangerous, have a lot of patrols, so they want to take a disguise and not get shot. But then when they basically get in and they, oops, let me put this quickly, they hit that big moment, something blows up, something big happens, that's when we're going to go loud out, and the alarms are going to go off, and the guns are going to be shot at. Letting the player adapt to that situation and deal with it, and go for a more dramatic action movie type moment.
So Sean is based on a real character, right?
I'd say inspired.
Inspired,
Like,
alright.
we took him in a completely different direction and made him our own character.
Alright.
We wanted to, because we wanted to make, again, it was about the fantasy of the war. We didn't want to be tied to real historical events. We wanted to go with that Indiana Jones, big over-the-top kind of feeling. And so, but you know, it was a really great inspirational character, but then, yeah, we made Sean our his own personality. And for us, he's a little bit of Indiana Jones, a little bit of John McClane from Die Hard, and that classic, like, Steve McQueen kind of cool, all rolled in one. Even though we're making a sandbox game, we were really wanted a lot of the designs to feel more level mission based. So like even at this point, like I'm now on basically a big moving level, and we actually put a lot of design into like what train cars we would be using for different cover or for different heights and elevations. But it's also moving through this big sandbox. You also see things here like using the colors in the world to really make things pop out, things that are going to blow up. We want the player to shoot those things. It's rewarding to shoot things and blow up a bunch of enemies. So like I blew up that tower there. I could have blown that up earlier and that sniper would have never bothered me. Or you'll see a bunch more of those along the train as I play. But I've been playing the game a lot recently, and basically I'm estimating it's probably 15 to 20 hours probably for the first play. And then it took me about 15 hours to get through the main story. And then there's probably another 5-10 of side missions. And then to deal with all the towers and the tanks, I couldn't even tell you how long that's actually going to take. There's a lot of content there. We use cinematics because the story is such a big focus for our game. We had to deliver some storytelling elements in the game that you just can't do through gameplay. Our missions do tell a lot of the pieces of the gameplay as well. But at the same time, we knew we'd have to have cinematics to deliver some of the other things that you just couldn't do, or we really wanted the player to just watch so we could tell a little storytelling moment in the game.
Okay, great.
So there you go. Cool.
Oh, thanks a lot.
Absolutely, thank you. So this mission takes place just before basically about the halfway point in the game. Sean is working with the British SOE. He's being Irish, he's not very excited about working with the Brits, but he'll do it because if he helps them, they'll point him towards this guy Dirker that killed his best friend. So that's really Sean's motivation, is vengeance. So he reluctantly works with them, but he'll do it. This is Skylar. She's an old friend of Sean's actually from back in the racing days, and it kind of helps pull him into the SOE. So she's gonna help him out here. And when we started work, we had a lot of fantasies when we started working on this game, but one of the fantasies that I was really big on is when we started looking at Paris, there's all these really awesome cemeteries, and really wanted to have a firefight in the cemetery and have a big kind of mission in the cemetery. So when I went to actually go to Paris and actually on a research trip, I wandered around this cemetery for about 3 hours, like having fantasies like a 5-year-old boy having shootouts inside of the cemetery. So the premise of this mission is kind of a little bit of an homage to like an Indiana Jones kind of flavor in the game. We're kind of a fantasy of the war. We're not really historically accurate. We take a lot of liberties. So the point of this mission is the Nazis have unearthed an artifact inside of this cemetery, and the SOE wants it, take it away from the cemetery. So they're going to use Sean to go in and get it. Skylar's going to go pick up a truck and meet us up kind of where it's at, and then we're going to take the artifact out of there. So part of the fantasy of being a saboteur is not running in and shooting everybody like a mercenary. It's about sneaking in and breaking necks and taking uniforms and disguises. So we facilitate in the game, and so we designed it around what we call quiet in, loud out. The idea is to go in quietly, break a neck, get into the heart of the base, plant the bomb, it goes off, the alarms get raised, bullets go flying, and you kind of fight your way out of there. But you don't have to play that way. You can play it really however you want. You can go and shoot everybody in the face if that's what you feel like your best option is, or that's just the way you want to play. So we'll play this a little bit sneaky. There's a lot of ways through this cemetery. I'll take you through some of my favorite ways through this area. So there's some little hidden undergrounds. Again, just kind of playing up the fantasy of these areas and the crypts and the catacombs of feeling. Sneak up here. So like I was saying, you can take a disguise. We'll put that on. You still have to play by the rules. You can't just run around shooting everybody or climbing around the world. You still have to play the part of the Nazi. If I was in my civilian uniform inside of this restricted area, I'd be shot on sight. But when I'm in my civilian outfit and I'm just climbing buildings in Paris, what'll happen is if somebody sees me, the ring will, or meter will start filling up, and when it fills up, they'll blow a whistle and raise the alarms and send in reinforcement. Disguise works almost exactly the same. If I'm standing still, I'm kind of acting inconspicuous, so I have a very small, what we call perception range. If I start running around, I'm bringing a little bit more attention to myself. If I start climbing, it gets really big and I bring a lot more attention to myself. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of take guys out. There's a whole melee system, definitely some different types of stealth kills. I really like to beat those guys over the head with the gun. So see, if I start sprinting, I'm bringing more attention to myself. So if I start sprinting into this area, if somebody sees me, it'll start filling up my meter. I can walk past a little bit slowly, but you still have to be careful to kind of play the part. Those guys are going to get me. So they saw me. I'm basically going to blow my disguise. They blow the whistle. That sets off and starts alerting people. But at this point, we put a lot of effort into our gun system. So we have a cover system like every third-person shooter in the entire world does now. Our cover system's all dynamic. I don't have to hit a button. I just move up. Sean takes the cover. For us, it was about making him always look like that cool action hero that we want to be in our hearts. And it's very fluid. We made a lot of effort to make sure it's not overly sticky like a lot of the cover-based games. Because our character can run, jump, and climb like he's climbing over there. We needed it to be fluid so you weren't getting stuck when you wanted to do some sort of like bigger action. So let me get through here. So we're going to get out into the cemetery here. And he'll just move around and use the different pieces as cover. Shoot that guy in the back. Flamethrower guys blow up if you shoot him in the back. So we're moving into basically the heart of the base, and so there's definitely a lot more soldiers in this area. So you really got to be careful to use the cover. I have it in easier mode because I can't really talk and play the game on normal difficulty. But you'll see we have a full screen health effect instead of like a health bar, and it recovers over time like a regenerating health system. We did that because our character's really inspired by a lot of movie heroes like Indiana Jones and a bit of that die-hard Bruce Willis's character. So we wanted him to be able to get beat up and then get back into the fight of the game. Oh, where'd you come from? So again, now we're going to move back down into the crypts. Hide out inside of here. So again, it was really wanting to have that Indiana Jones kind of fantasy really inside of our game. That was a really big influence on our game, having this guy with very personal motivations rather than political motivations, but having the Nazis as our bad guys and then kind of using the war more as a backdrop. So I've completed the big objective in the mission. Sometimes it's at the end of the mission, sometimes it's in the middle of the mission. And so the will to fight comes back out in the world. It's nighttime in this area right now. So it's a little bit, it's not as like, sometimes it's when it's colorful and it's daytime, it's real easy to see. By this point in the game, the player's seen it probably at the daytime more than anything. And we wanted that kind of, it sells the idea of the cemetery also having it at nighttime. So we've got the trunk, or we've gotten to the trunk. and then we're gonna they're gonna load the trunk up into a truck, and then we're gonna escape out of the area. So it's kind of that quiet, we call it the quiet in, loud out fantasy. So now we want to push into that high action kind of moment. So they've loaded the trunk up onto this truck here. It's a big, crappy, slow German lorry. So, but we're gonna have to use that. It's the only thing that she could get to hold the trunk.
In that case, I'd be sure to enjoy the time I've got left.
Skylar getting the truck here with us. So because this truck is so slow, there's a good chance, you know, if I take my time, I'm gonna get it blown up. So we have this idea in our game that we call fight back zones. And this is where we actually teach the player how to use them in the game. And so the idea is when you inspire an area, you bring it to color. You're not liberating areas, you're inspiring areas. You inspire the people and the resistance will fight back alongside of you. So if you're having a shootout in the street in the color area, the resistance will actually show up and actually start fighting back against the Nazis. And then there's this idea that we call the fight back zones. And they're kind of like they're like hiding spots or like a paint and spray, but they're combat centric. Oops. So instead of it being passive, we wanted to use the combat mechanics of the game and actually fight back with the Nazis. So the resistance have bunkered down in these areas. Move it. And so that we're going to pull up there and fight back and push the Nazis back and shut off the alarms. There's a lot of things in our game like that. Fuel station, there's AA guns up there, there's towers spread all across the world that are what we call the ambient occupation of the game. It's this whole layer of occupation we have everywhere in the world. And for us, it's like a collections mechanic because we have a character that can climb anything in the game that looks like it can be climbed. And so it's part of like a collections mechanic, but it's all combat centric, much like this fight back zone is. It's not passive, you're using the aggressive fighting mechanics of the game. So now we're at the fight back zone. Get out of the truck here.
Let's get stuck in!
So you see all the resistance are fighting. There's a lot of tools for the player. I can jump in this AA gun and use that to shoot. Oh, that thing's gonna blow up in my face. Careful not to get myself killed here. So we've completed the fight back zone that pushes the enemies back.
Right, let's get moving.
So now what we can do is Skylar's going to jump back in the car with us. Get in there. So now it's definitely like that's kind of the high action of the mission. Now we're going to basically just take the truck back to one of the headquarters. Little storytelling, and you can see we have a lot of different types of headquarters in our game. The one we're taking it back to is what we call La Villette, which is actually a real slaughterhouse inside of Paris. And it's buried underneath the slaughterhouse. We have one in the catacombs, one hidden under a park. There's an abandoned church up in Le Havre. And then there's what we call the Belle de Nuit, which is a cabaret brothel that's hidden in the red light district in Paris. So we'll pull in here and park the car. Oops. So that's where the mission complete is moment. But so it's all like it's a sandbox game, but we do a lot of level-based kind of design and philosophies for the missions. And so you can see though, it's a big giant map of Paris. And it's not just Paris, it goes from Paris all the way up that way to the coast of Le Havre, and then all the way across into Germany. And there's all this countryside in between with all these big giant chateaus as well. So it's a big game. There's a lot of area to cover in the game. It's not like a one-to-one scale map of Paris. We actually condensed the map of Paris down, put all the monuments where they belong to their real-world scale, and filled in the world in between. And literally every block in the game has things like towers and generals and tanks that are all part of that occupation layer to fight in the game. So there's really a lot to do inside of the game. So there you go. So the Saboteur is a big blockbuster open world action sandbox game with all kinds of tools and all kinds of action, as we like to say, and the player has lots of means to fight back against the Nazis and inspire the world around them. I mean, the idea came about really when one of the owners of the company actually read a book about a real Bugatti, one of the drivers of the Bugatti team that was actually a race car driver turned saboteur, and it like on paper that seems like a ridiculous concept, but it's real, and so we wanted to make a character that was believable in that way, but also kind of larger than life like that character is, and so that's definitely where we really started our focus, and we really wanted to have to sell the fantasy of you know, being a saboteur is definitely more intimate, and it's kind of close and up personal, and because we have this more personal kind of backdrop story, everything about our game is about making everything intimate, and so our graphic details about making everything in the world feel intimate, but then also taking it to like that big over-the-top blockbuster action thing, like in Indiana Jones, really, where it's, you know, he's definitely kind of quieter and he's kind of punching it out with bad guys on the streets, and then eventually something huge happens, and you know, it's blockbuster and it's grand and it's epic, and it's something that you normally don't see in a sandbox type game, and we really wanted to have stuff that you normally only see in like a level-based game, but also in a sandbox.
Jeśli lubicie klimaty II wojny światowej, ale znudziły się wam strzelanki w stylu Call of Duty, jeśli kochacie Paryż, ale nie macie pieniędzy na wycieczkę, jeśli uwielbiacie skradanki, ale równocześnie ubóstwiacie gry akcji oraz samochodówki, wszystko to może odnajdziecie w jednej grze. Wysłuchajmy, co ma do powiedzenia pewien sabotażysta z EA. Czy mógłbyś nam opowiedzieć w kilku zdaniach, czego dotyczy fabuła gry The Saboteur? Scenariusz gry został oparty na prawdziwych wydarzeniach, zainspirowany prawdziwą historią kierowcy wyścigowego Shona Devlina, nazywanego sabotażystą. Uznaliśmy, że to znakomity pomysł na grę, nie chcieliśmy jednak tworzyć kolejnego zwyczajnego produktu osadzonego w realiach II wojny światowej. Staraliśmy się więc pokazać zupełnie nowe spojrzenie na ten temat. Nasza gra opowiada o irlandzkim kierowcy, który przemierza drogę z Francji do Niemiec po tym, jak dowiedział się, że jego przyjaciel został zamordowany przez niemieckiego oficera. Główny bohater nie miesza się więc w wojnę z powodów politycznych, lecz wyłącznie z woli zemsty. W trakcie swoich zmagań z nazistami współpracuje m.in. z francuskim ruchem oporu, brytyjskim kierownictwem operacji specjalnych, a wszystko po to, by dopaść ludzi odpowiedzialnych za śmierć przyjaciela. Czy w grze będą występować elementy gry wyścigowej? Pomysł przedstawienia w grze kierowcy wyścigowego, który staje się sabotażystą, może wydać się trochę zabawny. Jednak, jak już wcześniej wspomniałem, fabuła została oparta na historii prawdziwego człowieka, kierowcy wyścigowego. Chcieliśmy oddać to jak najpełniej, dlatego spotkasz w grze kilka kluczowych momentów, w których przyjdzie ci wsiąść do auta i ścigać się po ulicach Paryża. Co jeszcze poza ściganiem czeka nas w grze? Traktujemy grę jako pewien zestaw przyrządów dla gracza, nie zmuszamy go do grania w określony sposób. W The Saboteur spotkasz się z elementami skradanki, gdy będziesz przykładowo podkładał i detonował bombę. Wybuch spowoduje wiele zamieszania, wtedy pojawią się elementy akcji. Strzelasz, uciekasz, wspinasz się na przeszkody, zjeżdżasz po linie, pędzisz samochodem i przebijasz się nim przez zamkniętą bramę. W grze będziesz miał sporą swobodę. Jeśli nie chcesz czy nie lubisz się skradać, nie musisz. Równie dobrze możesz biegać i strzelać do wszystkiego, co się rusza. Nie chcę nikogo zmuszać do pokonywania gry w określony sposób. Co ciekawe, w grze nie będzie sytuacji, które można nazwać złamaniem ciszy. Chodzi o to, że jeśli wywołasz alarm, czy zostaniesz złapany, nie kończysz gry, musisz sobie poradzić, wziąć się w garść i znaleźć wyjście z tej sytuacji. Gra będzie więc należeć do gatunku gier skradanek, tak? Skradanka to chyba w tym przypadku za dużo powiedziane. Nie musisz się ciągle ukrywać i siedzieć w cieniu. Tutaj bardziej chodzi o to, żeby zbliżyć się po cichu do przeciwnika, porządnie go sprać i zabrać mundur. Po takim momencie zakradania się następuje przyspieszenie wydarzeń w grze. Nie są to więc w czystej postaci podchody, lecz pewnego rodzaju połączenie skradanki i dynamicznej gry akcji. Bohater gry to taki Jason Bourne w realiach II wojny światowej. Jest trochę podobieństwa w obu tych postaciach. Obaj potrafią się dostosować do każdej sytuacji. Jednak sabotażysta nie jest specjalistą w tym, co robi. Nie jest wyszkolonym żołnierzem, tylko kierowcą wyścigowym, zuchwałym Irlandczykiem, który często używa pięści jako argumentu. I pije irlandzkie piwo. Pije sporo, do tego pali i jest typem kobieciarza. Chcieliśmy z niego zrobić klasycznego bohatera filmowego, w którego każdy z nas w głębi serca pragnąłby się wcielić. Niestety jest to niemożliwe, bo nie każdy może zostać bohaterem. Czy gameplay będzie liniowy? Nie, absolutnie. The Saboteur należy do tak zwanych piaskownic, czyli występuje w niej duży, otwarty świat, po którym swobodnie się poruszasz. Możesz podróżować z Paryża do Le Havre, na północnym wybrzeżu Francji, czy do Niemiec, a pomiędzy tymi lokacjami znajduje się sporo wsi i wioseczek. Misje w grze to wspierają, jednak nie stworzyliśmy sandboxu w czystej postaci. Powód jest prosty. Chcieliśmy umieścić gracza w pewnej historii, dlatego niezbędnym było wprowadzenie do gry zamkniętych poziomów, pozwalających na rozwinięcie fabuły. Płonący cepelin czy pędzący pociąg, będący pewnym przemieszczającym się levelem. Poszczególne elementy składają się na gameplay. W grze bohater używa broni. Czym możemy strzelać? Dostępna jest cała masa rodzajów uzbrojenia. Pistolet, karabin, strzelba, granaty, miotacz ognia, wyrzutnia rakiet, karabin snajperski, a także kilka narzędzi przydatnych do sabotażu, takich jak dynamit czy wykreowane przez nas urządzenie do zdalnej detonacji. Nie jest to jednak uzbrojenie związane tylko i wyłącznie z jedną ze stron konfliktu, jak ma to miejsce w innych grach traktujących o II wojnie światowej, gdzie dysponujesz tylko taką bronią, jaka jest na wyposażeniu twojej armii. W grze bohater może zakupić sprzęt na czarnym rynku, będzie więc to broń różnych frakcji. Znajdzie się tam też uzbrojenie stworzone na potrzeby gry, gdyż występuje w niej fikcyjna grupa wrogów zwana Terror Squad. Oni stosują bronię do ataku z ziemi, ale są nad wyraz fajne. Czy miasta występujące w grze są prawdziwą kopią, czy tylko luźnym odwzorowaniem rzeczywistych odpowiedników? Miasto pokazane w grze jest czymś pomiędzy. Nie chcieliśmy odwzorowywać Paryża w skali 1:1. Dążyliśmy do stworzenia otoczenia ekscytującego i ciekawego, które dostarczy wiele przyjemności w czasie jego przemierzania. Zmniejszyliśmy więc nieco tę metropolię, pozostawiając zabytki w oryginalnej postaci, a następnie dobudowaliśmy inne budynki pomiędzy nimi. Powstała więc nieco skondensowana wersja miasta, która jednak utrzymuje prawdziwy klimat Paryża. Korzystaliśmy z materiałów referencyjnych. Włożyliśmy w to naprawdę sporo pracy i serca, aby odwzorować tego ducha Paryża. Jak dużo czasu zajmie ukończenie gry? W moim przypadku wyniosło to ostatnio około 15 godzin, jednak ja jestem dość zaznajomiony z grą. Przeciętnemu graczowi ukończenie głównej fabuły powinno zająć jakieś 15 do 20 godzin. W grze występuje sporo pobocznych, nieobowiązkowych zadań, jak przykładowo dodatkowe misje ruchu oporu. Tylko od ciebie zależy, czy je wykonasz. Zabawy wydłużają także umieszczone w grze dodatkowe cele, takie jak wieże, czołgi, działa czy niemieccy generałowie. Twoim zadaniem jest je zlokalizować i zlikwidować. Działa to podobnie do systemu zbierania ukrytych paczuszek znanych z innych gier, aczkolwiek nie zachowujesz się wobec nich biernie, lecz musisz wykonać pewną grupę czynności. Gra jest już na ukończeniu. Jesteśmy bardzo blisko końca, pozostały drobne poprawki, doszlifowanie i poprawienie pewnych szczegółów. Granie w grę w aktualnym jej stanie sprawia naprawdę ogromną przyjemność. Kiedy gra ukaże się w sklepach? W grudniu tego roku dostępne będą wersje na PS3, Xbox 360 oraz PC.
And my mouth, my girl, and my gun, and my freedom.
Bonjour, je suis Jérôme Austin, chef de produit sur Label Games chez Electronic Arts. Ce lancement fait sens à Paris. On est accueilli au Loop, dans Saint-Germain-des-Prés, avec un spectacle de French Cancan. Des restants traînent dans le bar, des danseuses essayent d'aguicher nos journalistes et tout le monde a été touché par le jeu. Tout le monde est là à Paris ce soir pour Saboteur.
in this game, it's really about Sean as an origin story of a race car driver becoming a saboteur. The idea doesn't seem believable actually just on paper, but it is inspired actually by a real life person.
We felt like our character should be relatable. We felt like he should be a guy who's kind of coming up through the ranks, a guy who's worked honestly as a mechanic. He has his flaws. You know, we want him to be human, and so he's got his good sides and his bad sides, but in the end he goes through a great character growth and a great story arc. The game gives you the ability to move around Paris freely and you know, climb up buildings and experience everything, but even though it's kind of got a beautiful fantasy to it, it's really grounded and based in real Paris. It has the monuments, you know, the Eiffel Tower to Notre Dame to all of the great landmarks. The game does such a great job of representing this city that it's a really great experience to really be here now and see it all in real life and just connect it to the game.
So the idea was to like, oh, let's make it black and white, pull the player's eyes towards things or make things pop out that we wanted the player to see. And then from there we learned a lot from watching a lot of film noir, and then also it's definitely the Sin City movie. We learned a lot of tricks to make it look good in 3D space.
They realized that they could take a very stylized approach and through a unique color palette could actually give the experience to the player of the oppression, the tone, the feeling of, you know, being in an occupied state. And that is the ability for the player to not only experience, you know, this black and white world, but through their actions of sabotage and revenge, actually bring color back to the world and inspire the people around them to stand up and fight back against this horrible occupation.
A few of us have played like the whole game a couple times over, but at the same time, like some people have only gotten to play like the missions they work on because that's all they had time to do. But now that they have time to play it, and they're coming into my office and be like, we made a really cool game. Like I didn't see how much cool stuff we had in this game. And just seeing all these pieces of the, you know, have come together of all the different mechanics, the economy, the world, the story, the graphics, the everything. It's amazing. And to me, it's the thing I'm most proud of that I've worked on.
C'est un ovni dans l'univers des jeux vidéo, par son aspect esthétique, on en a parlé, ces mouvements de couleurs, ce choix artistique, la musique, les environnements Paris. Il a une approche, voilà, je répète le mot, mais artistique, nouvelle, qu'on retrouve très rarement dans les jeux vidéo, et assez mature, et qui, moi, me touche personnellement.
Hey guys, this is Erin Darling for CoinOp TV, and we're here at Pandemic Studios, and we're going to go check out the game, The Saboteur.
Really fast. I can do it. I get to the front of the train, I can kill the conductor, jam the throttle, a bypass an entire encounter at the end. But it's, you know, it's not adapting and letting the player, again, kind of play the way they want to play or play at their pace.
Hey guys, I'm standing here with Tom French. He's the lead designer on the game, The Saboteur. Can you tell us a little bit about the main character and what his deal is and what his background is?
So Sean, for us, he's the action hero that we all want to be in our hearts. Like if I could be cool action hero, which I'm not, Sean is the guy I'd want to be. And so what we did is we looked at a lot of cinematic influence, mainly a lot of Indiana Jones. Die Hard was another big reference for John McClane's a great hero, and that classically cool kind of Steve McQueen. And so we really started with those as character references and basically created Sean.
Something that's really interesting to me is that this game is actually geographically correct in terms of landmarks. That's really cool. What inspired you guys to be so exact with where the Eiffel Tower is and, you know, the Arc de Triomphe? What inspired you for that?
Well, the one thing we wanted to do was we wanted to stay true to the city. France had never been done and focused on in a game before, so we wanted to keep its true form. And we had the opportunity to actually go to Paris to see what the city was like, and we realized that, okay, you know, some of our initial ideas about how we wanted to lay out the city were not quite accurate. So we said, you know what, let's just take it from let's take it from scratch and say, how's the city really laid out? And it turned out that the way the city was laid out was actually geographically friendly to how we wanted to create the gameplay. So we decided to use the landmarks not only just to have them, but we wanted to make sure that they were a part of gameplay. And also it tells you in the world where you are, so you know if you're near the Opera House, or you're near the Seine, if you're near the Hotel de Ville, or near the Louvre, or near Saint-Sulpice, or any of those different places. So it's a visual reference, and also kind of an ode to the visual style and things that you recognize from Paris.
Also, I noticed in this game there's kind of a community aspect where when you do things and you rebel, people kind of get behind your actions and you kind of inspire the local people in the community. Can you tell us a little bit about how that works in the game?
Yeah, so it's tied to what we call the will to fight of the game. And the will to fight comes from this idea of we were going to build Paris, and Paris is this beautiful, vibrant city, and we wanted that fantasy in that, because that's the fantasy we all see in our heads when we think about Paris. But the idea of just occupying that, putting a bunch of Nazis, didn't make it feel occupied. So what we did is suck the life out of the world, and for us that was the color. And so basically in the low will to fight, which is the heavily occupied areas of the game, it's black and white and it's very noir feeling. But when you do these big missions in the game, color literally bleeds back out into the world and inspires that pocket. You're not liberating the world because it's still occupied France. The Nazis are still in control. But what you do is you inspire the people. So when you get out in the streets and you have a fist fight, the people will cheer you on in the color areas. Or if you start a gunfight, resistance will start showing up and actually pulling out the guns themselves and literally fighting alongside of you. Or when the alarms hit to a certain point, the resistance have bunkered down at these spots that we call fight back zones, and you pull the Nazis up there, and then the resistance will help pounce on top of the Nazis and literally push back the threat.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the GameSpot E3 2009 coverage here on the stage. I'm joined by Tom French, the lead designer. How you doing?
Good.
And I'm also joined by my good friend Jared Bailey. How you doing? Production tester. And you guys have brought the Saboteur. Actually, go ahead and tell the folks at home what you brought.
Yeah, so we brought the Saboteur to show you guys today. We're really excited to be finally showing this game publicly, and so what we're going to do is we'll just take you through one of the missions in the game, and we'll talk about a lot about how the game was made and like what a lot of things mean in the game. And so one thing you'll see immediately here is we're in a color area. Our game has color and black and white in it. We use the black and white to represent the occupation in the world, and because just putting Nazis in a colorful Paris world, it just didn't feel right. Like they feel kind of out of place. So when an area's been inspired, it's color. And so what you'll see is we're at a resistance headquarters in Paris at a real park called the Bois de Boulogne. We have all the monuments and landmarks of Paris in there. It's a scaled down version of the map, but everything is there, and so everything's closer than it actually really is. So that way, what our goal was is to really fill literally every block in the game with something to do. So what you can see though is like these color and black and white areas exist side by side. We're an open world streaming sandbox game, and you can literally go anywhere in the game. Sean has the ability to scale things and climb buildings, and you can climb the Eiffel Tower even if you want to. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump in Sean's car. This is his baby. We call it it's called the Aurora. Early in the game, you actually get to race this car. Sean's a race car driver turned Saboteur, which is a ridiculous concept on paper, but it's actually inspired by a real person. And so we're like, wow, what a cool concept. Let's make a game based off of that. So what you'll see is he's driving now into the black and white world, what we call the low will to fight. And what will happen in the game is when you do these big missions, the color will then bleed back out into these areas. And you're not liberating areas, you're more inspiring the world. Because what will happen is, the Nazis are still in control. They're still the occupying force of France. And then what will happen is you'll inspire the people, and the resistance will actually join you in the streets fighting back against the Nazis. One of the things we really like to show here is, in our game we didn't want to have we wanted to use a collections mechanic, but instead of it being very passive where you just walk over things, we wanted to use the mechanics of shooting, gunplay, and climbing and sabotage. So these things like the propaganda speakers that you see, or the tanks, or there's a little tower off in the distance, those are all things you can interact with at any given point in the game, blow them up, shoot a general or something like that, and you're rewarded for doing so, and then it's gone forever. So I'll show you how it actually has interplay even in the mission that we're playing right now. And then you'll see things, we want to make the Nazis really harsh, especially in the low will to fight area. So you'll see things like harassments that'll turn into executions, and just paint a really grim picture and make the bad guys the baddest the bad guys. They're already Nazis, they're bad guys, so we hate them so much. Yeah. We built Paris instead of just normally building a bunch of buildings and stamping them down in the world, you'd get a lot of repetition in there. And Paris is, it's a very vibrant and beautiful city, and everything has such a personality and flavor. So we built our buildings out of Lego pieces, really, so we could swap them out and literally give every block and every
everything you see kind of its own bit of personality to it. So every block in the building is unique essentially in the game. So Sean's got an objective here. It's really simple. He's got to blow up this giant cannon. And they didn't really install this giant cannon in Paris. I like to say we're more historically inspired, you know, and we're kind of going for that big like Indiana Jones feeling. It's more over the top. We have things like Zeppelins in our game, which were decommissioned, but they're cool, you know, and then fun.
I mean, Medal of Honor, even, you know, the original one, they got away with some fictional stuff wrapped around it.
You make things a little more interesting that way and just kind of push it a little bit. So what he did here is he beat that Nazi up and he took his disguise. This is one of the ways you can get through the game, is actually by stealing disguises. And kind of we employed this concept of what we call quiet in, loud out. So the idea is that it's better for the player to go in quietly and break a neck and wear a disguise. And then when the big objectives happen and you're having to flee, to actually, like, that's when you're kind of run and shooting your way through Nazis or stealing cars. But one thing that's really fun to show with this mission is kind of showing how you can use the Parisian buildings as part of the combat and show the flamethrowers and things like that. So we really wanted to have a lot of different weapons, and the flamethrower is such a great piece of like iconography of the war. And we have a huge variety of weapons, all the classic, like, you know, World War II guns, but we're also not limited to just German weapons. We can get weapons from different parts of the world through our black market system.
The color scheme, by the way, is super neat the way that works.
It really, it's something we put a lot of care into making it feel right, because we knew we wanted to do it, like I said, to sell the occupation and almost really beat the idea of the occupation over the head. But it makes you feel the mood of that world when you're inside of it. So what you can see is he can really use this environment to just go anywhere he wants. And Sean can climb literally anything. Like I said, the Eiffel Tower is something you can actually climb in the game. And so we're going to grab a sniper rifle here because this mission it's almost a key tool to getting through this. But it's a sandbox. Again, like our whole world is a big streaming world. You can go from Germany to Paris to a coastal town in France, and it's all streaming. And all these buildings are, you know, interactive, and you can move around in the environment. So
that's a lot of, like, and you can go in them and all of that?
Yeah, you can go. Well, you can. The buildings, not most of the buildings you can't go in, but we do have some key locations, especially for some big set pieces. One of the things we really want to have is a bunch of set piece events in the game and do big over-the-top action events. So what you'll see here is, like, again, you can approach this so many different ways, and I've watched Jared play this demo like 20 times in probably this week alone, and it plays it literally different every time. But you'll see how we use the color to even just pull attention to something. Like, so that tower over there is what I was mentioning, the occupation of the world. You can go blow that up before the mission, and that sniper's gone. So if you're having a hard time with this mission, you keep getting sniped in the back of the head, just go into the area, and when you're not in the mission, it's probably a little less occupied. Take it out and then go back into the mission, and actually, you're not getting, that sniper's gone forever. So you can see he's got a bunch of different weapons. We're using some machine guns, there's pistols, shotguns, a bunch of different rifles, rocket launchers, and they all serve a different tactical purpose in the game. And we have some other weapons that we've made up, the kind of some fantasy weapons, because like I said, we're not historically accurate. We want to go that pulp kind of big over-the-top kind of game.
But and I'm just curious, the character that you based on, he is real though, or he was at one point.
He was inspired by somebody real. So there was a driver named William Grover Williams for the Bugatti racing team, and the idea of he was a Grand Prix champion. He was half English, half French. And when the occupation happened, he fled for his life from France. And so he went back to England and was recruited by what they called the British SOE and reinserted, because those guys were daredevils. Those cars were so not safe. Like, they were so dangerous. And he knew France. So he's this perfect candidate for, like, a daredevil saboteur. He's going to get hit with the rocket launcher if we're not careful here. But so yeah, we took that as inspiration, and we changed a lot of things. One of our focuses really early was making a story and separating ourselves from the war. We didn't want to make a World War II game in a way. Like Indiana Jones isn't a World War II movie, but it's got Nazis, and they're great bad guys. So that's really where we started with everything in the game.
I'm sure there's a ton of questions piling up from our audience. You mind if I look toward them? Let me do that right now while you guys make your way through.
One of the things you can see that we're really happy with is we wanted to make the Nazis dangerous, and so to make the player fear them and have really heavy combat situations. And we wanted to have a cover system. Like, everybody has cover systems, but we made our cover system purely dynamic. So, like, it always makes Sean look like an action hero. When you just kind of move up behind cover, he'll just take cover naturally.
And because our character is so nimble, we actually made it very fluid, so you're not being like stuck inside of the cover.
5 Minuten. Hydraulic system auf Maximalkapazität.
Marno Peterson out of Goodyear, Arizona wants to know the weapon set you have in there. We've seen the sniper rifle, we've seen grease gun. What else you guys got in there?
So like there's pistols, there's machine guns, there's rifles, sniper rifles, shotguns. They weren't commonly used in the war, but we definitely wanted them because they're a great piece of combat. The rocket launchers, which actually we'll probably grab one at the end of this demo. There's also different types of sabotage weapons, a couple different types. You'll see one of them right here, which is a fictional like remote detonation device. Yeah. We wanted that like classic plunger kind of fantasy, but the reality is they had to lay wires and it was really boring. It'd be such a tedious mechanic. So we kind of made a remote detonation device that kind of combined that idea together. So he's going to blow up his big objective here, and you'll see basically like kind of the high concept of what happens with the will to fight.
Nice.
And so now you'll see the color will then bleed back out into the world. And so what'll happen is the people will start returning to almost like their pre-war lives, and they'll be out on the streets more, the farmers markets will be open, and like I said, the real key to that becomes the resistance. And so you drag Nazis into those areas, have shootouts, the resistance will start popping out and fighting alongside you.
Now, my question is, that just seems like, it seems like awesome. Like, what happens now in this area now that you've completed that mission? You say that as people come out, what do I get any kind of mission types out of that area anymore, or is that done?
So no, there's still, one of the things that'll happen is still, some of the things still exist, like the towers and stuff that I was talking about. Like, there's one over on your right. Oh, actually, here's something we always like to do. You know, we wanted to have the Zeppelins because they're such a great fantasy piece, you know, but, and we definitely wanted to shoot them down. We use them like helicopters in our game. When you piss the Nazis off enough, they'll come around, flying around with guns and searchlights and drill on you.
I've got a question from Emmett Hondo out of Israel. He wants to know how many mission types will there be? Will they be distinctly different from each other?
Actually, I mean, it's tough to really say different mission types. Like, all of our missions are different, essentially. Everything's really story-centric in our game, and so there's a main story arc of Sean's vengeance quest throughout the story that kind of serves as the backbone, and it branches a few times. And then along there, there's one of our mantras was everybody has a problem in this world. Every character in the game has a developed kind of backstory and a reason why they're in this world. And so you'll meet resistance members that have their own problems, and Sean can choose to help them or not. And then in between there is that whole occupation layer to fight as well. So there's literally something to do pretty much all the time in the game.
We got some time for more. Denise at Armenia wants to know, are you guys doing anything online, whether downloadable content or anything else?
So we're not talking about any DLC plans, but you know, we're really focused. We didn't do multiplayer because we really wanted to focus on Sean's story. It was so important for us to deliver that as like the key pillar of the game. And so we put all of it into that because it was just kind of a distraction and took away from him as a hero.
How about his progression through the game? I mean, we obviously see him pulling out these rocket launchers and stuff, and you've talked about some of the weapons and some of the other items you can get a hold of. Any character progression as we see him go through?
So there's definitely a character progression system, which we'll talk about a little bit more, but even just our hero's story, we wanted to have progression to it. And so he starts off as this, he doesn't care about the war, the politics of it. He just cares about racing, and he cares about his friends. And when his friend dies, that's literally his motivation for everything. But by the end of the game, he starts to kind of buy into the cause and become like a true hero.
What else we got here? I think we got time for some more questions. This one's coming up. Dixon Amos out of Bristol. He says he really likes the black and white view a whole lot. If he really wanted to, is there a way that he can have that just be a constant?
I mean, yeah, I guess so. You could just not play the missions, but I mean, you'd miss a lot of cool content, but you could just play and just run around the sandbox and take out all the towers and the anti-aircraft guns and tanks in general. So there's a lot of content to explore literally on every block in the game.
Sean and Alan, ask you a question. Do you guys have any vehicle stuff happening here?
So, I mean, Sean's a race car driver, and so it was really important for us to have that in the game, and we didn't want to just do a montage of, here's Sean as a race car driver. We wanted to actually let the player do that and race in the game. So you go to Germany and you race in the game, and so we have a handful of really cool race cars that you'll get. And there's also, you know, there's civilian vehicles, there's military cars and trucks and motorcycles and tanks, so there's a breadth of different types of vehicles and gameplay there.
As you progress through the game and go further in the story, do you hook up more and more with Resistance and have other people working with you to help complete goals?
Yeah, so what you'll do is you'll start with a small core, and you'll meet them, and then they'll start connecting up with other Resistance cells that start forming in the different pockets of Paris that we have in the game. And then also even outside of that, Sean will hook up with the British SOE through a friend of his and go on a little kind of mission side quest kind of from there, where they're kind of, again, just, he's not doing it because he wants to fight the cause. He's doing it because he wants to kill this guy Dirker. And so they dangle a carrot in front of him like, you know, you scratch our back, we'll scratch yours. And they're like, we'll give you Dirker if you get us this trunk. It's a trunk, so he goes into Paris and the Nazis have unearthed a trunk in a cemetery and the SOE want it. And so Sean brings it to them, and then from there they're like, all right, we'll give you Dirker.
A few people want to know, is it possible to ever get on a Zeppelin?
Yes, absolutely. Like, I mean, that was kind of, actually it's one of the earliest fantasies when we're like, we want to put the Zeppelins in the game. And there's a couple spots where we actually, so we have the little ones that we fly around. We nicknamed them Zeppy around the team. They're kind of our pet Zeppelins. And those are small ones, but like I said, they're kind of like helicopters for us. But then there's one mission actually where you're boarding that to actually get somewhere in the game. And then there's this big set piece Zeppelin that we have in the game, which is, it's probably 8 times as big as those small ones there. And that actually concludes in this big dramatic ending where you're actually running through the Zeppelin on fire, chasing your nemesis.
Now we saw him duck into that room right there and like peeking his head out of the door. What was going on there?
So we didn't want to have just being able to running away be the only way you could get away from the Nazis when you're in trouble. So because they're occupying it and they're kind of everywhere, so it's really hard to sometimes get away. So we have these different types of hiding spots in the world. And what you saw was like just like a shack hiding spot. And as long as you can get there without anybody seeing you, you can hide out. Time will pass and things will kind of calm down in the world. And we have a bunch of different types of those. There's these little pissoirs, which are these little like French peen areas out in the public, like urinals, I guess, in a weird way. And then we have these little brothels, and there's other kinds of rooftop hiding spots. Just a lot of variety of those types of things in the game.
That's super cool. Let me ask you, the game looks fantastic. How far along is it?
So basically we're at a content complete state. Like everything is there. And now we just have time to polish and refine it, and really, we're trying to deliver a really, big experience and want to make sure it's awesome, so.
Running through the streets there, it looks, are you guys using an engine that we've seen before?
No, this is our own engine. When we originally started working on the project, we were sharing tech with Mercenaries, but we realized very quickly we were making a very different type of game than them. Theirs is about flattening everything, and for us, we wanted intimate kind of detail and high fidelity. So we built our tech from the ground up. It's called the Odin engine, and to do this like tight detail on the streets, and then when you get up on top of the Eiffel Tower, still be able to see the huge landscape and vista.
Excellent. Tom, the game is Saboteur. It is coming out when?
It'll be out this holiday season.
Excellent. When we any tips, any clues to maybe we will see a playable demo?
We're not talking about any of that. So hopefully, though, we want to share the game with everybody. We're really proud of the game.
Excellent.
So
I think you should be. It looks really fantastic. Thank you so much, Tom. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for playing. And we're going to be moving on and take a look at Alpha Protocol. We'll be back with our live stage show as we return. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tom French. I'm the lead designer of the Saboteur, and we're here to give you a first look at the game. Our main character is named Sean Devlin. To us, he's the hero that we all really want to be. Doesn't take a lot of shit from anybody. He has a race car driver background, which back in the days, these race car drivers were crazy, and so they're really more daredevils. Sean's main goal in this game is about vengeance. He's trying to get back at some Nazis that wronged him, and so that's basically the main thread of the character in the game. So the war literally is just a backdrop setting. And he's in Germany, really on what ends up becoming almost the eve of the Nazi occupation of France. And what starts off as something fairly innocent turns horribly, horribly wrong, and somebody really close to him gets killed. And from then that kind of leads Sean on his vengeance quest. Looking at the city of Paris, like all these buildings are kind of built on top of each other, and they all have their own distinct feeling and look. We started with a scaled down version of Paris with an old map, so we can get everything like to the size that we really wanted it to be. And so what you get is kind of like a Disneyland version of Paris, so everything's kind of closer than it really actually is in the real world. Down on the streets, you get really high fidelity, and then as you move up to the rooftops, you have this incredible draw distance. For us, black and white equals occupation, and color equals inspiration, because you're inspiring the people in the world. And then with inspiration comes resistance. So as the player plays the game and progresses, as they beat missions in like grand acts of like defiance against the Nazis, they'll restore color to area. And so when you climb up on the Eiffel Tower, like if you're at the midpoint of the game, you could actually look out and you'd see almost like a progression of how much you've actually kind of inspired the world.
Hey everybody, I've got Tom French from Pandemic Studios right here, and we're going to talk the Saboteur. So Tom, obviously World War II is a pretty common setting for video games, but your game is doing something pretty unique with that. What can you tell us about the Saboteur, and how does it set itself apart from those other World War II games?
It's something really, we made a very conscious decision early along in the development of the project that we originally, so the main thing originally was just separating the story. It's not, the game's not about being a soldier, you're about a race car driver turned saboteur. And so and that's actually inspired by a real world hero named William Grover Williams. And so we started with that, and so we really just kept wanting to kind of separate ourselves from the war. And so our game's not in the front lines, it's more like a blockbuster action movie, like an Indiana Jones or something like that. So it's not, it's just killing Nazis, you're blowing up Zeppelins and doing like big action moments as well. And then on top of that, we have the whole kind of the will to fight mechanic with the black and white and color, which really just does something different that you're not used to seeing in this kind of space.
Can you describe that in a bit more detail, that will to fight mechanic, and how it changes over the course of the game?
So the concept for the will to fight came when basically we knew we were going to do occupied Paris, and you think about Paris when you close your eyes and you have this beautiful, vibrant, colorful, lively city, but if you just put Nazis in there, it doesn't feel occupied. And so we really had to kind of turn that over on its head, and that's where we came up with the idea of doing black and white. And so it literally kind of sucking the life out of the world. And so it kind of inspired by Sin City, we put up the kind of the big bold colors and the flags. And so as a player, to us, that represents occupation in the world. And so as the player plays these kind of big missions in the game and does these grand acts of sabotage and defiance against the Nazis, he'll bring the color back to the world, which is, and to us, color is inspiration. And you're not like single-handedly liberating Paris by yourself. You're not a lone wolf like taking down the Reich. But at the same time, you're inspiring the people in the world. And as you inspire the people in the world, they'll come back to life, and they'll come back out into the streets and almost to their pre-war lifestyles. And then after that, we'll really come to resistance. And that's really where the gameplay comes from, the inspiration that people will be inspired, and that will bring resistance in the streets. And that's where the gameplay comes in, as they fight back alongside you.
Now, you mentioned Paris as the game's setting, and obviously the Saboteur is sort of this open-world sandbox game, and in those types of games, the setting is a huge part of that. How have you gone about converting such a majestic, historic city into an open-world setting?
So Paris is a huge challenge, and we actually go actually off into parts of Germany and even like the upper coastal parts of France as well. But Paris was like a really unique challenge, and like getting to visit Paris, you see these buildings kind of cobbled on top of each other, and everything just has its own kind of personality to it. And we really wanted to capture the spirit of Paris, but at the same time, we didn't want to build as Paris to scale. We really wanted, as a mantra, we had this. We wanted to put something literally on every block in the game, something to do everywhere. And so what we did is we started by scaling down a map of Paris and building all the monuments to real-world scale and putting them where they belonged on this map. And so what you get is almost like a Disneyland version of Paris, where things are a little bit closer than they actually are. But what's cool about that is you see a monument from every other monument, so they become navigation tools. And then from there, one of the last key things is it's kind of part of our Odin engine, and it allows us to render this way, is we built all the buildings out of kind of like Lego pieces, and so every building, and we put those down in the world, these are like kind of collections. And then from there, we could swap them out and give every single block its own personality and add little accents and details. And so literally every block has a different kind of flavor and feel to it.
How much control, as Sean, do you have over sort of the outcome and the story that unfolds in this game?
So Sean has this main vengeance quest, and that's his main story in the game. And through that, he starts off with somebody that really just cares about racing, cares about himself and his friends, and pretty much nothing else beyond that. And throughout the game, you'll meet people and different resistance people, and you can take on their side stories and kind of care about their problems and inspire other pockets in the world. And so that's kind of the main character growth of the game, and it's Sean's story, and there's definitely some little interactions and twists along the way that the player will get to play.
Well, Tom, it looks like you guys are doing a lot of interesting stuff with World War II. I know I'm excited, but before I let you go, when is the game going to be released, and which platforms will it be available on?
So the Saboteur will be coming to the Xbox 360, PS3, and PC, and we don't have a date for you at the moment, but we'll get one to you really soon.
Thank you very much, Tom. We should have a lot more coverage on the Saboteur leading up to that unspecified date.
There are few things in this world that are sacred to me. My friends, my car, and my women.
So I think this interview needs to start by sort of explaining the setting here.
So yeah, this room, we put this room together to kind of, like, we have a kind of seedy underbelly of Paris in our game, and this is kind of to help set that mood and want to get people in a demo and talk about the game. So and it's really comfortable and quiet, which is nice too, so we can not yelling on the floor at each other. So yeah, it's really cool. It's great.
Can you tell us a little bit about the character and why he ends up in a place like this?
So Sean is a Irishman who's the race car driver that turns Saboteur, inspired actually by a real world person. He goes to Germany early in the game for a race just before the war, and what happens is after the race something goes horribly wrong, and somebody close to him is killed by a rival racer who's also a Nazi. And so basically that kicks Sean off on a vengeance quest, and how he gets here is he goes to when he flees into Paris, his friends kind of hide him out in what we call the Belle de Nuit, which is a cabaret brothel right across from the Moulin Rouge in our world. And so it's this kind of seedy underbelly club, and it's a really interesting location where kind of a lot of the story really kicks off in Paris.
Can you tell us a little bit what Paris is like at the time when Sean gets there?
So when Sean gets there, the occupation, he's there just before the occupation, and you'll see in a scene where we'll actually see the occupation kind of rolling in, and he's hiding out there, but basically kind of by the time the player really gets to go out into the world, it's fully occupied. And the black and white look of our game, what we use to symbolize the occupation, is just everywhere in Paris, and you basically end up spending a lot of the game kind of fighting back against that.
It's not a game that's easily explained because it doesn't really look like anything we've seen before. It's not, you know, your typical World War II game. Yeah, it lends a few elements from Mercenaries and games that Pandemic have done before. How would you describe the game?
I mean, at its core, like the simplest term is it's a big blockbuster action sandbox game. Like that's kind of what we do, and it's kind of Pandemic's brand in a way too. Like we like to make big action games, but yeah, I mean it is kind of hard to describe, and like we don't even call it a World War II game in a lot of ways. It's like we have Nazis; they're great bad guys, and to us it's like Indiana Jones is in a World War II movie but has Nazi bad guys, and so the war is a backdrop, and that's why we have the vengeance story, and we do like the color palette stuff that we do. We took a lot of like liberties. We're more inspired by the history. We have Zeppelins in our game, which were decommissioned, but they're awesome, and we want to blow them up, and it'd be really fun. So, it's just a big action game, but with a lot of like cinematic movie kind of elements all tying it together.
How much freedom have you taken with like the World War II theme? It's a bit of a sensitive thing, I guess, to play around with it.
It's just like we wanted to really. I mean, we kind of play up the resistance in the game. We really wanted to kind of like glorify that in a way. But everybody's kind of there's a seedy side to it, because normally it's the soldier story, in the game, in the World War II games, and so again we just didn't want to do any of that, and so everybody's got their own personal motivations in there. It's very character or story driven, and we have this really just dark, seedy world, and we try to pay respect to things. We're trying not to like be hurt anybody's feelings with anything, but we're just going really big and doing like things that like we have giant cannons installed on buildings that didn't really happen, but it'd be cool to blow them up and to have fun in the game and really use our sandbox.
You mentioned briefly the color palette and what you're doing with that. Can you explain a bit in detail what the thoughts are behind that?
So the idea of the black and white comes from the fact we're like, okay, we're going to build Paris. We knew we were building Paris because we were inspired by this character that actually existed in Paris, and the Paris occupation was such an interesting time in this beautiful city to explore anyhow. So the idea was you have Paris and it's colorful and it's beautiful, and if you put Nazis in there it just doesn't feel occupied, so we had to really kind of amplify that, and so the idea was to suck the life out of the world, is like what we like to call it, and so that's where we came up with the whole black and white concept, and then kind of inspired by Sin City, definitely, to put like the colors in there popping out to give the player something to look at, and we really spent a lot of time trying to get our black and white to look great. But then what's cool is that you can actually fight back against that. And so when you do these missions, and we call Grand Acts of Defiance, you'll complete some big objective, and you'll blow up a big cannon, or you'll take down a train, and the color will bleed back out into the world. And what that does is inspire the people. So like when you're in those colorful areas, what we call the high will to fight, the resistance will join in, and so people like kind of take arms and start fighting alongside of you back against the Nazis.
I've heard about Saboteur for quite a while. You announced it quite early.
Yeah.
Has it been a struggle, the development, or why is it taking so long to get to a point where you actually showed off full-fledged?
So I mean, we really put a lot of work into maturing our technology and fleshing out the missions in the game and just building it and refining it. And so it's kind of just our time to come out of the dark and really like show the game. And we built our own technology for this. It's not the Mercenaries engine. We started sharing technology with them, but we realized that immediately we were going to make a much more intimate kind of game, and we wanted that kind of graphic fidelity down in the world that you'd see in like a level-based type game. But when you can get on the rooftops, you can see across this huge draw distance across the world. And so we knew we had to a lot of it's just really maturing that tech to really support the gameplay and our character and our story to flesh the whole game out.
And when will we get to play it?
You will get to play it this holiday, so before the end of the year.
All right. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And my mouth, my girl, my gun, and my freedom.
Bonjour, je suis Jérôme Austin, chef de produit sur Label Games chez Electronic Arts. Ce lancement fait sens à Paris. On est accueillis au Loop, dans Saint-Germain-des-Prés, avec un spectacle de French Cancan, des restants traînent dans le bar, des danseuses essayent d'aguicher nos journalistes et tout le monde a été touché par le jeu. Tout le monde est là à Paris ce soir pour Saboteur.
And first in this game, it's really about Sean as an origin story of a race car driver becoming a saboteur. The idea doesn't seem believable actually just on paper, but it is inspired actually by a real life person.
We felt like our character should be relatable. We felt like he should be a guy who's kind of coming up through the ranks, a guy who's worked honestly as a mechanic. He has his flaws. We want him to be human, and so he's got his good sides and his bad sides, but in the end he goes through a great character growth and a great story arc. The game gives you the ability to move around Paris freely and climb up buildings and experience everything, but even though it's kind of got a beautiful fantasy to it, it's really grounded and based in real Paris. It has the monuments, the Eiffel Tower to Notre Dame to all of the great landmarks. The game does such a great job of representing this city that it's a really great experience to really be here now and see it all in real life and just connect it to the game.
So the idea was that let's make it black and white, pull the player's eyes towards things or make things pop out that we wanted the player to see. And then from there we learned a lot from watching a lot of film noir, and then also definitely the Sin City movie. We learned a lot of tricks to make it look good in 3D space.
They realized that they could take a very stylized approach and through a unique color palette could actually give the experience to the player of the oppression, the tone, the feeling of being in an occupied state. And that is the ability for the player to not only experience this black and white world, but through their actions of sabotage and revenge, actually bring color back to the world and inspire the people around them to stand up and fight back against this horrible occupation.
A few of us have played the whole game a couple times over, but at the same time, some people have only gotten to play the missions they work on because that's all they had time to do. But now that they have time to play it, and they're coming into my office and being like, we made a really cool game. I didn't see how much cool stuff we had in this game. And just seeing all these pieces of have come together of all the different mechanics, the economy, the world, the story, the graphics, the everything. It's amazing, and to me, it's the thing I'm most proud of that I've worked on.
C'est un ovni dans l'univers des jeux vidéo, par son aspect esthétique, on en a parlé, ses mouvements de couleurs, ce choix artistique, la musique, les environnements de Paris. Il a une approche, voilà, je répète le mot, mais artistique, nouvelle, qu'on retrouve très rarement dans les jeux vidéo, et assez mature, et qui, moi, me touche personnellement.
So Saboteur is a game inspired by a real hero named William Grover Williams. He drove for the Grand Prix champion for the Bugatti racing team. When the Nazis invaded France, he fled the country, but was reinserted and became a saboteur. These race car drivers were daredevils back in the days and really crazy. And so we're like, wow, what a cool character. Let's make a game based off of that. And so we started with that as inspiration and then made our own character in our own kind of world. And ours is a very personal story about Sean and him being this race car driver turned mechanic, and he doesn't have motivations in the war. Like, we use the Nazis war as more like a backdrop, really. Right. And so basically what happens early in the game is Sean goes off for a race. Something goes horribly wrong and somebody close to him is killed by a Nazi who's also a driver for his rival racing team. And so it puts Sean off on this vengeance quest. And so it's a very personal story with this, amazing war backdrop behind it.
And what mechanics are you using to make the war backdrop seem different than other games?
So the biggest one is what we call the will to fight. So when we knew we were going to build Paris for this game, is we were going to have, we wanted this vibrant, colorful Paris, because that's the fantasy of Paris. But just having Nazis out there, it doesn't sell the occupation and like just the feeling of Nazis occupying land. And so we came up with the concept of literally flipping that over on its head and sucking the life out of the world and making everything go black and white. When you're in an area that's heavily occupied, it's black and white, and it has like the reds from like swastikas and flags pop out in the environment to really just kind of just give players interesting things to look at, like a Sin City comic book. So then what happens is you fight back in these missions and you'll do something against the Nazis, some big event, blow up a cannon or something like that, and the color will bleed back out into the world and inspire the people. And that ends up there's a cosmetic effect of just the people coming back to life. More people doing cafes opening and things like that. But then there's the kind of the gameplay of like the resistance. You're inspiring the people, and so the resistance really kind of builds and fights alongside you in the streets.
Is there a difference in how safe you'll be in the two areas?
It still requires some player attention. You can't just be like, you park in a color area or a high will to fight area and just be safe. The Nazis will still engage you, but you have the backup basically at that time. And there's other things where the resistance will help you fight back in really big ways and help you actually turn the tides against the Nazis and let you basically escape.
Is there a very large stealth element to the game?
So stealth was a very big piece of the fantasy of being a saboteur. We knew we had to have it and we wanted to have it. We wanted to get up behind a Nazi and crack his neck. Like, that was just something we wanted to do. But we're never forced the player to play that way. It's a sandbox, and we let the player play the way they want to play. Everything is designed around this concept that we call quiet in, loud out. And so the idea was to facilitate the player to always be able to get in quiet. But then on top of that, we allow the player to go in guns a-blazing. And then what happens in a mission, they'll always reach this like kind of critical mass point, where even if you've gone there quietly, something's going to go big, and you're going to have to like blast your way out of there. Just push it into that big action kind of realm. We wanted those big action moments of like Indiana Jones. We want to always kind of make sure the player has those moments in missions. So we had this real guy that was like larger than life hero. Right. Like, that's really cool, but we didn't want to just do the typical World War II soldier story, and it didn't fit with the character anyhow. And so Indiana Jones was a huge influence. Like, having this person that hates Nazis but isn't a soldier, and he hates it for very personal reasons. We wanted Sean to be a classically cool hero. We wanted him to be the hero that we wanted to be. Like, that I fantasize about being when I go home. Like, if I could be an action hero. And so we wanted that like Steve McQueen quality. He's smooth and he's good with the ladies. He's got that charming kind of quality about him. But also a huge influence was Bruce Willis's character, John McClane in Die Hard. Like, we wanted a hero that just get beat up and just laugh about it a little bit, and then just kind of get back to the fight. So he has, he's surrounded by a very serious situation. Like somebody close to him is killed and vengeance, and that's kind of a dark motif. Right. But like,
we wanted him to be a likable hero, somebody that we want to be and just looked up to and want to hang out with, really. Yeah, we have a really fleshed out cast of characters. We have a pretty large cast, and it was really important for us to give everybody their own personal motivations. Like Sean has his personal motivation, and it's kind of this like private secret war, and so everybody's got their own reasons why they hate the Nazis in this world. And the Parisians are obviously pissed because the Nazis have occupied their country, but they all have even that in there. There's their own little side things, and it's kind of funny because there's like 90% of the details that we know about the characters the player's never going to know.
Right.
But it really just helps us give a lot more breadth to the characters and make them feel a little more natural in the game. Saboteur will be out this holiday season on the Xbox 360, PS3, and the PC as well.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.